Hello. Welcome to the live stream, y'all. Good to see everyone. Good morning, good night, good evening, wherever you're at. Good to see all the people in the chat. How you doing, RC, Z-Man, Super Lion, Super Meat Boa? All right, guys. So today we have, I guess, an interesting topic. We'll see how the conversation goes. Either way, it should be fun because I already see some of the people that might be part of this subculture coming into the chat already trolling. So today I'm on with an honored guest that I had the privilege of meeting when I was at the monastery. So a Salish brother, young Penitent. I'm going to bring him up here and have him introduce himself, and then we'll get right into the conversation. Welcome, YP. How you doing, brother?
Good morning. I am well. How are you?
I'm good. All right. So just introduce yourself to the audience. Tell people what you do online and where they can find you.
Okay. So I'm YP. That stands for Young Penitent. And Young Penitent was my name as a rapper. I have a YouTube channel, and many people don't know this. I was actually a pioneer of Orthodoxy as a YouTuber because my videos go back to 2012 when I first uploaded my music videos. And back then, I think that Father Spiridon Bailey was probably the only YouTuber that was Orthodox. So I'm consider myself a pioneer. I'm no longer young, so that's why I'm kind of going by YP today.
All right. And I have all of YP's links in the description. So if you guys want to subscribe to him, follow him on his socials, all his links are in the description. All right, YP, can you, before we get into sort of the meat of the conversation, can you tell us a little about your journey and how you came to Orthodoxy?
Sure thing. So I was raised without any sort of faith at all. I wasn't really taught anything in the home, and so it was a vacuum. But I still had a interest in kind of philosophical thinking, spiritual things. I remember wondering about God since I was a kid. And so then when I went off to college, I began a earnest spiritual quest to find truth. And I explored, a bunch of different traditions. I was kind of interested in Hinduism for a while, but through the influence of several campus ministers, I actually started to looking into Christianity. And so from there I went and I started, visiting different churches, and I'm starting to hear that echo in my headphones, but it's going to be bothering me for the podcast, but I'll forge on. So couple campus ministers started kind of guiding me in Christianity. And there was a Lutheran campus minister at Oregon State University who got to know me, and he thought I would be a good fit for Orthodoxy, and he recommended I go to the local Orthodox church. So I went, I visited the church, and after one service, that was it. I never went to any other church again. This deal was sealed, and I eventually became Orthodox.
Awesome. And you've been Orthodox for how long now?
So I was baptized in 2006.
Okay, so yeah, so you've been Orthodox for almost 20 years. So this is one of the reasons why I brought you on for this conversation, because you've sort of seen all the trends, at least within the last 20 years in America, and those have really been the significant trends, especially, you know, with social media blowing up in terms of, you know, online orthodoxy, different subcultures, meme cultures within orthodoxy, the different edit bros that put out those based edits on, especially on IG. There's quite a few of them. It's funny, we have a few people at the parish that came to the church because they saw some cool edits. They're like, you know, aesthetics is one of the reasons why people come to the church. I don't have anything against that. Okay, so let's just get into the conversation then. So what is an orthobro to you, YP? How would you define that term, orthobro?
Okay, so I actually did a dedicated stream on the phenomenon of Orthobros, and it's called Revenge of the Orthobros. You can look it up if you want. It's an older stream, but I kind of broke this down, and so I learned of the history. Apparently, this term was coined by Catholics and Protestants who were using it as a characterization of the Orthodox, young Orthodox men online who were, you know, they were interacting with. So it came from outside. That was where it originally started. Today, the term has actually come to be, well, it depends on like kind of where you fall. It could be used as it's pejorative, you know, it's kind of a way, and even Orthodox people use this today. You'll hear a lot of priests will even say, you know, just they'll use this term for these online Orthodox guys who it's sort of a way of, you just label someone an orthobro, and then all of a sudden you don't have to pay attention to anything that person says. Okay. So and it tends to be used, I think, in more liberal jurisdictions, but not necessarily all the time. My own priest, who admittedly he's not online much, but he has even said several occasions that the orthobro phenomenon is a real problem, he says.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of used as a derogatory term, and then
Right.
a lot of people have sort of owned it, maybe
Sure.
in a joking way and things like that.
Right.
Um, so do you think the orthobro stereotype, whatever that may be, helps or hurts orthodoxy's public image?
That's a good question. Let's see. Okay, how do I want to go about this? I think, you know, we can use it as, I mean, we can kind of own it. Like in that video I made, I actually identified myself as an orthobro. And I don't know if I necessarily, at this point in time, you know, that was when I was still new to the internet. You know, you kind of said when you're leading one of the questions a little while ago, you were saying, you know, I saw everything develop online. I'm actually I feel like I'm fairly new to the online sphere. When I became Orthodox, and even when I had that I started the YouTube channel, I was not online. I did not have a computer in my house. I did not have a smartphone. I did not get online until 2018 when when someone gave me a smartphone. And that was when I first started to go online and venture. So And then from there was kind of a slow step-by-step journey. Whereas today I am probably online too much. And so the truth is, about getting around to your question, I think that the Orthobros, yes, they can be doing good work. You know, they're bringing in attention, people to hear, you know, about Orthodoxy. But a lot of the time, this has to be said, they will turn people away from Orthodoxy. And I've heard this from people. For example, there's a person at my parish who's an inquirer, and he said, you know, someone came at him and was being very kind of confrontational. And he said, if that's Orthodoxy, I don't want anything to do with it. And he stayed away from church for several years because of that experience that he had. So it is true that some of the behavior online can have a negative effect.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely varies from person to person, and yeah, some people are turned off by this overzealousness, I guess you could call it, online. Um, so you said you did a stream on it, so you sort of dug through the origins of it a little bit. So, where did this sort of persona come from? This orthobro persona, was it like a reaction to modernity, or sort of, or do you think it's a lack of deep catechesis or something else? Like, where does it come from?
I'd imagine that it comes from Orthodox, mostly men, young Orthodox men, online using social media for particular. You know, I've not got a lot of experience with IG. I never don't use that one, but the ones that I do have used are X and YouTube. So I think those are the this is a new phenomenon because so these social media platforms are new. You know, this didn't exist 20 years ago, really. So
Hmm.
it's Orthodox people using social media, particularly. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you? Well, you're on X a lot, and X is an interesting platform. I think X is probably the most extreme out of all the platforms when it comes to people's views, especially. Um, I mean, it has a lot of very interesting sort of subcultures on X. I, I actually try to stay off X because anything you post is gonna start
Right.
some sort of reaction. Um, do you think a lot of these Orthodox, because there's some, wild people with some wild views. I don't even know if they go to church or anything, right? We
Yeah.
have uh I don't know if I can say the word on YouTube. We have little mustache men, Orthodox people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
People, supporting these weird ideologies, or
Mm-hmm.
communist, Orthodox. They reconcile it somehow, and they're willing to debate you on it. So do you think a lot of these, not just these sort of, I guess we'll just call them weirdos, but do you think, especially on X, do you think all these people are like a genuine representation of orthodoxy, Orthodox values, or is it just like people trying to be edgy wherever they may be from, just sort of like a reactionary internet subculture?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the point about the little mustache man. Like talking about. I just put a post up, I think yesterday, about National Socialism, and a lot, on X, people will say, oh, all these young Orthodox are just right wing extremist Nazis, But what right wing extremist means today is traditional family values, you know. Um, it actually and some people deny that there are Nazis, joining the church, but actually, in my experience, I've seen this in my parish. There are people who actually identify with National Socialism, and they're coming into the church, and they don't see anything wrong with it. They see it as a healthy, wholesome ideology. my personal experience, my personal belief. I don't, if it's an ideology, it's not something that I adhere to generally. I don't really go for ideologies necessarily. My hope, and this is what I said. My hope is that, and this is what I said in the post was, orthodoxy. I think there's evidence that Orthodox should be actually monarchists, which is probably, I think, the best form of government. And hopefully someday there will be an Orthodox monarch once again. And that's probably like the most that like I could get labeled as I could get labeled as a terrorist for saying such a thing. It sounds weird, but like that is actually a very the people, the powers that be, they want, that's the last thing they want,
Mhm.
to have an Orthodox monarch, and that's why they killed the Tsar. That was like the last standing visible representative of Orthodox government in the world.
Yeah.
Which, and by the way, some of the Russian churchmen of that time, back in the early 20th century, that they felt that that was like from Revelation, when or is until, or what is it? What, not, was it not Revelation? It might be Ephesians, like when St. Paul says until something is taken out of the way. Anyhow, they were interpreting the killing of the Tsar as like a fulfillment of prophecy, which
Mhm.
it was definitely a major event in world history.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you in
I
term of.
can't hear you. Can you?
Oh, can you hear me? Can you guys hear
The
me?
audio went out for some reason.
Or is it just YP that can't hear me?
Hold on. Let me try.
Apologies for the technical difficulties, folks.
Can you speak again?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm not hearing you for some reason.
People in the chat can hear me.
So I wonder if I should leave and come back.
Yeah. Well, he can't hear me, but I think maybe he should leave and come back.
All right. I'm going to leave and come right back in. How's that sound? And then, because you can keep streaming. How do I? Okay.
All right, guys. Apologies for that. It looks like it happens. But anyways, good to see you, Maria Mongan. Maria is one of my Patreon supporters. It's good to see you, Maria. I see you guys are already starting to super line. You're already trying to start a geopolitical debate here, talking about Ukraine and Russia. Let's take a chill pill on that, and then some Tsarist sort of comments talking about hating on the Tsarist people. Well, yeah, Tsar Nicholas and his family are venerated in the church. They are saints. They're martyrs, I guess. Martyrs is sort of, it's a bit different than than sainthood. Yeah, some people pick Tsar Nicholas as their patron saint, but it's sort of different than, but Tsar Nicholas had a lot of, very, very good things about him. So I don't have issues with Tsar Nicholas. But it's sort of just a different concept than, somebody achieving, sainthood versus a martyr. It's a little bit different. It's viewed a little bit different in Orthodoxy. All right, let's bring YP back up here. See if you can hear me.
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Perfect.
Yep.
Awesome. So we were talking about the reactionary subculture on X. So, um, do you do you think a lot of these individuals, and you brought an example of somebody not enjoying the confrontations within Orthodoxy, which I think at some point, if you're gonna come in and you're gonna challenge Orthodox if you show up to you know a catechesis class and you're asking the priest, well, the Bible says this, and it's like, what? I know priests try to be sort of, at least my priest tries to be, understanding to these people because it's a lot of Protestants now showing up in these classes. But what do you expect? What do you expect the priest to be like? Just like, not confront you on your views and then give the Orthodox view. It's going to be confrontational. But do you think a lot of this, I guess, zealous behavior, and there could be, toxic aspects of it, pushes people, away from the church, or does more good than bad, brings a lot of people in, especially online?
I mean, it is bringing people in too, like, I mean, like I said, it's definitely, it's just because people haven't heard of Orthodoxy, or they hadn't, and now they are hearing about it. They see it. People are online, younger generations, you know. So I mean, it's a two-edged sword, but like, sometimes it's like, all right, so once you heard about Orthodoxy, then what? You see this debate and online, you see people, and you realize, okay, this actually is making sense. This argument's pretty clear, and he's got a point. Like, Protestants weren't even around 1,000 years ago. We weren't here. So what was happening back then? And you actually start to look at the history, and then what? Okay, you have to, once you find out about Orthodoxy, you see that there's something to it. You have to go home. You have to go to a parish. You have, bring it out of the online world. So once you start going to a parish, this is how Orthodoxy, has always been taught. It's you learn it from people. Like today, like you mentioned, we got the shorts. People are learning Orthodoxy from shorts and YouTube videos. The generation before us, they were, my generation and people before us, we were learning from books and people. And like before my generation, there weren't even really Orthodox books. There wasn't even much printed in English. So unless you had to learn, maybe you had to learn Greek or Russian to read spiritual books. I think you have to have a respect for the older generation, the generations that came before us, because let's be honest, it's better. The way that the faith has been taught and learned in previous generations, it's always better. The previous generations are better than the generations that come. But this goes back all the way to the apostles who heard the teaching of the gospel straight from God's mouth. So, you can't really say that we're learning the faith better today from watching shorts than the people who came before us, who heard the teaching of the gospel from the mouth of God. So I think that people need to, I have noticed that there is kind of an attitude of disrespect for older generations on the internet. So you need to have a humble disposition and go to those people who have been around. People who have gone through this, have been battle tested. Their faith has been tested. They've gone through trials in their own lives, and they still remain Orthodox. Those are the people you want to go to, to learn about the faith.
Yeah. And then you sort of touched on people consuming pretty much all this sort of apologetic aspects of Orthodoxy, like debates, from certain online figures that maybe exegete the faith. A lot of laymen, I guess, are in this space. We do have obviously Orthodox priests in this space, and then and a lot of the laymen, have blessings from their priests. But what do you think about those individuals that just consume this sort of content, and that is
Right.
their orthodoxy?
Okay. So it's not necessarily, the approach to Orthodoxy that I take. and that I learned. And and I'll explain. Okay, so like debating, I'm gonna starting off. There's nothing wrong with it, and like I said, if that's how you learn about the faith and it gets you to go to church, good, okay. But once you go to the church and you start getting direction from your priest, there's not a priest I know who will be guiding the majority of people. Most people who are coming to Orthodoxy, they're priests, they're spiritual, the pastoral guidance that people will receive from their priests is not going to be towards you learning the theology so you can go online and debate. They want, what they will be teaching you is more of a humble, because when you're learning, if you're learning for the purpose of debating, you're learning to, the purpose of your learning is to explain the faith to someone else. It's an externally oriented approach to orthodoxy. The approach to orthodoxy that I learned and that I was taught, and I kind of feel like I'm coming down on the I don't know, I hate to sound like I'm coming down on the kids, like kids these days kind of thing. And I feel like that, I'm almost sort of like that. But the approach to orthodoxy that I taught, the books that I read are, books like The Arena from St. Ignati, The Unseen Warfare, the Discourses of Abador Theos, the Ladder of Divine Ascent. These are monastic texts, and all these people that I read, what I read was, they actually say, don't read those kind of texts. Don't read theology. You want to read the texts that are applying the gospel to yourself. Instead of going out and trying to convert the world, you want to change yourself, your heart first. Christ says in the gospel, first take out the plank out of your own eye, and then you can go and take the speck out of your brother's eye. So first you have to do the work, apply the gospel to yourself, to your own heart. And once you've done that, then maybe you can go out and you can, engage in debates. And if you're going to engage in debates, you got to have a little bit of humility because you have to, the problem is people are, they don't acquire the patience. And so let's say you go on X and you want to convince a Catholic that he's wrong. Okay. And the problem is, when you don't have a little bit of patience, you start to lose your cool, and it always devolves and ends up with saying, you clown, you have clown masses, go to church, go to an Orthodox church. And that, what does that really accomplish? If that's your approach, you're just going to solidify the other person in their position, if that's how you do it. So I want people to be acquiring some patience, with it, in their interactions with other people. And then you'll be a good witness to orthodoxy.
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting conversation to, see the difference between arrogance and zeal, or find that balance, I guess, between it. And I don't want to talk about specific people, but there's, quite well known, right, Orthodox individuals within these spaces that I think perpetuate certain stereotypes and certain personas, especially, and sometimes understandably so, right? Sometimes people are coming into conversation, then they're disingenuous. They're just acting like sophists. They're just looking to get a clip off of you or something. And what do you think about situations like that? Like, how do we deal with that? Because, right, it's hard to have patience with these people that you can clearly see, like, this person's not coming in to have a conversation. They're looking for a clip to own you, right?
How do you have patience with these people?
Yeah.
I mean, I personally don't go out of my way to, like, what do I care about these non-Orthodox people, what they're thinking, Like, my audience, I feel, I'm directing my audience to believers mostly. So I guess I don't have a lot of experience. Like I don't go, I don't go on X and look for Catholic people or Protestant people, so I can go and tell them they're wrong. I don't really see those people coming into my comment sections, my replies. Most people that follow me are Orthodox. So maybe I don't fully understand, what's going on in these situations. Because I don't know. I guess I know that you mostly are going talking about Islam. So I imagine Islam's kind of a militant faith. I imagine they come at you probably like they want to put your head on a chopping block or something like that. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, so so I mean X is a little different if if you sort of have a lot of Orthodox people following you especially. But if you're one of those content creators, right, like the Jay Dyers and stuff, or some of the other people that engage in these open debate style conversations, like TikTok lives, you just literally post a topic like Protestantism is false, Islam is false, Hinduism is false, prove me wrong. And
hmm,
then guests just come up there and somebody's already like trying to come at me. I don't know if this guy's like a Protestant or not. But so that's sort of the angle I'm coming from is like when you post an and even on YouTube we've had right open lives like come refute me.
hmm,
People come in, very militant, ready to defend, their Protestant sect. They're especially Muslims, and the conversation very quickly tends to sort of devolve into, just unpleasantry, like, "Dude, you're
hmm.
an idiot," this and that. And
Right,
and
right.
sometimes it's a good thing, like, you want to have those conversations. For example, like, a lot of people, if you're coming from sort of an Western angle perspective, they're like, "Oh, these people are getting heated. This is not pleasant." Sometimes it does, you know, devolve into that. But a lot of times, for example, from like Eastern cultures, like that's how we discourse. Like
Hmm.
if even if I'm like talking to my uncles and it's a political topic, like it gets from the side, it looks like, well, these people are saying wild stuff in their language. But it's just how we're having discourse. And same with like the Middle Eastern culture, right? I mean, both Eastern culture, Eastern Europe, the Middle East. It's how the conversations are. Like you hear, passionate conversations in Arabic, like they're gonna be pretty heated if you were to come from a Western lens. So sometimes I think people are just sensitive to
Mhm.
you're not being loving. Like, what does that even mean? Loving thy neighbor. Like from your perspective, I'm not being loving. From the Eastern perspective, like we're being very loving. We haven't said a mean word, right? We just our language is very passionate. So, what are your comments sort of on those spheres of like open dialogues to where like anybody could, somebody could just come up and just, you don't know where the conversation is going to go.
So, I mean, I don't tune into those conversations. I don't follow those debates. I go elsewhere. If there's going to be a disturbance, it likely will disturb my own peace. So I'd rather go somewhere else. I'd rather go watch an Abbott Trefon video, where there is no disturbance because I don't want my own peace to be disturbed personally. So
Yeah.
like I don't go to those. I don't see why an Orthodox person would want to uh, go to that. I mean, I assume that your audience is not going to even be Orthodox. You're probably directing that towards. I mean, what percentage of your audience do you think are Orthodox?
Well, I think now it's a large percentage of people that follow me are Orthodox. But when I started out early in apologetics, I wasn't really coming at the general Christian sphere like Protestants or anything. It was just mostly Islam, some atheism, some Hinduism. So the early audience I accumulated when I got online was like a mixture and mostly Protestant.
Hmm.
Now I think a lot of some Protestants have stayed, and I have testimonies of them coming to the church. I have all those testimonies up there on my IG if you guys want to check them out. But a lot of them have unfollowed me, and I have them come in all the time, saying I'm not loving. Oh, it's this guy. It's Jay Dyer Jr. Whatever. There's all kinds of. I get called all kinds of names now. Um, so I think it's mostly Orthodox now, but I think, like, for example, we have a Protestant in here right now. He's saying I talk to Protestants like they're stupid. Well, sometimes if somebody is being stupid, I'm gonna say you're being stupid or ignorant. But
Mm.
anyways, uh, yeah,
Okay.
I would say it's a mixed bag. So it probably depends.
I mean, my own personal I think, like, if you're gonna be a fisher of men, just think about fishing. Okay, if you go out and you want to catch a fish, you're gonna go there, you're gonna find your spot, you're gonna cast in, and you're gonna sit there and be patient and kind of and as calm as you can and quiet. That's how you catch a fish. And the analogy is we're being fishers of men. So I don't and I think that analogy is perfect. That if you're going to be doing this, be patient with people, be calm, be quiet, and then when you got it, then you yank. You know, when you got the hook in the cheek, you know, then maybe there's that moment when, you know, but you're sitting, you know, this is like a skill, I guess, that you're going to have to learn. But I don't I do think we still I'm saying patience. We need to be patient with people, acquire the patience, you know, acquire the virtue, and people will see that, you know, like you watch a Spirit on Bailey video, and he's just so peaceful, you know, like people are just drawn to watching this peaceful person talk, you know. So acquire that patience, acquire that virtue, acquire that humility, and I think you will become an even better fisherman if you still have interest in it. Because honestly, most people, after they've been Orthodox for 5, 10 years, they lose interest in these debates. They don't really want it. They're like, you know, I'm not really interested in doing that anymore and putting a Protestant in his place. It's not really my thing, not anymore. I moved on, you know. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. It also has to do with preference. For example, you were saying, I just don't want my peace disturbed, so I'd rather, not engage with somebody if it's just like a heated conversation or stuff. And then some people enjoy it. I mean, right? Some people have been doing it for a long time online, and they still love it to this day. Um, i- but that conversation about, I agree with you. I think having patience is good, but I also think that context is important. And I mentioned a little bit about like Eastern culture, Middle Eastern culture, Eastern European culture as well. Um, to where like that's how you were talking about being fishers of men. Like when it comes to bringing people out of Islam, like that has been the best method specifically. I think for Protestants, you probably this is where I'm sort of critiquing myself. For Protestants, you should have a bit of a different approach because most Protestants don't come from that culture. But if you're having conversations with like Muslims, that
mm,
sort of like patient, soft approach has just never been effective. Just in my personal experience for talking with Muslims for a long time,
sure.
online and offline, I grew up around Muslims. The best sort of approach to Muslims is just like to bash them over the head with their faith, and then they're like, well, okay, like you'll see it like you're in a conversation with a Muslim, and then you start like really hammering at them, and they're just like, it's a weird dichotomy between doing it to a Western Christian and they get all emotional and just upset and leave the conversation,
Mm,
versus a Muslim to where they'll pause and they'll be like, well, yeah, I guess you're right, and you're like, what? Oh, yeah, I am. This is wrong. This hadith, Muhammad is a fault, whatever the conversation is. So it's sort of different, and the approach is like, if you're very passionate, heated, like, then you really believe it. You're a masculine man, you represent what a true man is. You really believe it, as opposed to like, you're so soft spoken, like, do you
mm.
even believe what you're saying? That's sort of the Eastern mindset there.
Are you having success bringing Muslims to Orthodoxy? Is that part of those people
Yeah.
who left?
Oh, yeah. Well, the first step I think would be with them leaving Islam, and then everybody that's in that space that just pretty much there's a whole space where like that's the whole conversation is with Muslims.
Mm,
And there are some people that have a more patient approach, But even like the very patient people you see, there's just time where they're just like, dude, I've had enough today. And it's just
Yeah.
so the space and the sort of the that space is an aggressive space. And yes, a lot of Christians do criticize that space, that Muslim Orthodox space, because it's very, heated. There's a lot of like you'll be in conversation, a Muslim will just come in and be like, "You're nervous. You're stuttering. You're stuttering when you respond." Like off the bat, you're trying to respond. They're like, "You're stuttering. What are you doing? You're stuttering," because they're just trying to, you know, they're trying to emasculate you. And Christians do criticize that space, saying like, "You guys aren't loving yourself," but it's because they're not in that space. And it
Mhm.
does bring one, it brings a lot of people out of Islam, and then they're just lost. And it's like, well, what is there after Islam? So it's like, right, some people go into just general evangelicalism, but if it's in the specifically Orthodox Muslim space, then we're bringing him into the Orthodox Church, and it's very similar in a lot of ways. There's a lot of structure there, so it's a lot
Mhm.
easier for them to transition to the Orthodox faith. And we have a few people at our parish that came from Islam, and I love having conversations with them now about these things. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, yeah.
That's interesting. I'd like to know more about like these Muslims becoming Orthodox. Like what is that like for them? What is that?
Mhm.
How does that process? What is that process like? What do they have to struggle with? What are their hangups and things like that?
Yeah, I would love to bring in, and I think you would love to bring in an ex-Muslim, now Orthodox person on the channel and have that conversation with them. And you'll see, just having a conversation with it, you'll see how aggressive they are towards their previous faith. And it's just the
Hmm.
way it is. Like you'll see they'll like flat out like call their prophet this and that after coming out of it. And you're like, oh, dude, you're turning people away. Don't be like that. And it's like, no, they need to know. They'll tell you themselves, like, Muslims need to know this.
Hmm.
So it's a sort of different space. So that's kind of what I mean by context. But I do agree with you, like conversation with like Catholics, Western Christians, Protestants. Sometimes personally for me, it's hard to get out of that Islamic space. And I'm like, and with a Protestant, and I'm like looking at him the same way, not realizing like this guy is like, you know, grew up in the West. He's very soft. He didn't grow up in a war torn country or something.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
uh, maybe that's the case. Do you think this sort of like zealous culture, like orthobro culture, whatever you want to call it, you think it's kind of a uniquely based also on your following online? I don't know where most people that follow you are from, or if they're just mostly Americans. You think it's sort of a unique American expression, this culture, this kind of fusion between zeal and meme culture, or is it sort of widespread? It doesn't matter where they're from. It could be like Serbians and stuff like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is. There are Serbians and people in Europe and other areas who are using the internet and these cultures and memes and things like that for sure. I do think that the Americans are the leaders right now, which is kind of a strange. We're the leaders in using the internet and social media, this kind of thing, and that's just part of the reality of America being the empire, and we're even though it's kind of a declining, we're still the leaders in culture worldwide. We export our culture, and so it's a strange twist of fate that Americans who are new to orthodoxy, it's a couple hundred years old here, are leading the Orthodox culture in the world online. I mean, even in my parish, like Russia, they were under communism for 70 years. Many of them, most people, most of them, they weren't taught the faith. They weren't able to learn about it. Maybe if they were lucky, their grandma had them baptized as a baby or something and taught them about God. Most of these people, we have immigrants from Russia at my parish. They honestly they don't know they didn't know the faith when they came to Orthodoxy. They didn't know the faith. They're just converts, just like us. And in some cases, they even look to the Americans who have maybe been in the church longer as as an example of people who know the faith better, interestingly enough. So I do think that it's being led, this internet culture, Orthodox internet culture is being led by Americans, for better or worse, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. A lot of times people, when they think of cradles, they sort of think of like, some super knowledgeable Orthodox Christians. But usually, in terms of just like straight head knowledge, you know, and that's, important in some sense. Obviously your theology has to be lived out. My priest is always saying that. I think the converts have way more knowledge, and it's because they were sort of looking into it, studying it for years, watching debates, whatever. Um, and a lot of the cradles are just sort of nominal Christians. I mean, you'll see a lot of that when you go to, Orthodox majority countries. They're just sort of even even now. I have a good friend. Sometimes we go out to, Banya and stuff, and he's an Orthodox Christian, right? Cradle, baptized as a baby. Some will occasionally show up, to church with me. But when it comes to having, conversations about orthodoxy, theology, and stuff, he's like, he doesn't even want to have that conversation. He's just like, oh, I just love this part on Easter when we do the Easter baskets. I just love that part, dude. I just remember as a kid, it's so much nostalgia. Like, he's a cradle, but that's his orthodoxy. Is like, yeah, and it's beautiful that he loves these things. When it comes to engaging like in depth about his faith, he's just kind of like, I just love everyone. I just this, right? Just not trying to bash these people, but right, nominal, right, just Orthodox by name. It's
Sure.
sadly a common thing, right, in Russia and Ukraine, and I've spent some significant time in both those countries. It's sadly a common thing. They'll say they're Orthodox. You start having a conversation.
Hmm.
It's like,
Right.
what have you been practicing your faith? What, not trying to judge people here. Do you have any comments on that?
Right. Well, I mean, it's true that some people raised in the church, many actually fall away. They might not be um, they for them it's showing up to church on Sundays, which is a good thing too. Maybe they don't know as much about the faith as the converts who came in and they read every book and they watched every video. So yeah, that's true. And I'm not knocking that. Actually, it's a good thing to know about your faith. You know,
Mhm.
so we are the body of Christ. You know, so everyone has their um, everyone has their own gift, their own talent that they bring to the table. But we can look to those cradle Orthodox as people who are patient. You know, they will be that.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially I mean, I love going back to the old country and going to divine liturgy there, and just especially the babushkas. Americans like to pronounce them babushkas. The babushkas. I mean, and usually the babushka, they're not like deeply knowledgeable when it comes to like theology, but they
Mm-hmm.
know the faith, like what you need to
Mm-hmm.
do, certain
Yep.
practical things. Like they'll tell you all about that. But I just love their faith. It's just a genuine faith, and and they're not, and they'll correct you when like if you like show up, you like sit down, you're a young guy and you sit down during service, like you might get hit in the back of the head. It doesn't matter how you could be 35, they'll be like, get up, why are you sitting? You're in the
Yeah.
Lord's house. But I just love their faith is so genuine. They're there every Sunday, and I think we can learn from these people because they might not have some deep theological knowledge, but they're practicing the
Mm,
faith. Like
mm,
these people are they're living orthodoxy.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, it's the babushki
Mhm.
are the best examples of Christians in the parishes, my parish, the parishes around me that I've visited. It's the babushki who are the best examples of Christians. So
Mhm.
it's without contradiction, you know.
Yeah. Um, so speaking about like American Orthodoxy and talking about, you know, Americans sort of leading this charge, especially online and when it comes to orthodoxy. Do you think orthodoxy in America, it hasn't really been around that long, around like 100 years or so?
Oh, it's
Uh,
I think more than 200 years
okay,
actually.
about 200 years. Um, well, when the Russians first came here, right?
Right.
Do you think it's maturing, or are we still kind of in this edgy convert phase?
I think it's maturing. Yes. Yeah. Uh, Not mature yet, you know. Maybe we're not ready for our own autocephalous church yet, you know. Maybe, probably, you know, maybe it might take a little time, but we're getting there. I mean, a couple hundred years, you know, that's not something to shake a finger at, you know. So,
Yeah. What do you think real lived orthodoxy in America looks like in comparison to online orthodoxy? Like, what are some of the things that are like you think are probably happening online, but like this is not the reality of orthodoxy? Like, uh, just sort of the compare and contrast between lived out orthodoxy and online orthodoxy.
hmm. Well, for one thing, most people, I think, like in my parish, and thank God for this, most people in my parish, they don't go on X. They might, you know, they know me, so they know my YouTube channel. So people at my parish do watch my channel, but most people, probably at most parishes, are blissfully unaware of what happened on X this week. They are unaware of the debates, the scandals, you know, a lot on if you're online and you have a some sort of public persona at all, you're gonna fall into there's gonna be some drama, you know, and there will be hurt feelings and people will be offended. And, you know, you go on X long enough and you start to say, you know, I don't want to talk to that person. I'm going to block this person. I'm going to mute that person. But if you go to a parish, that doesn't happen. You know, like I'm friends with everybody in my parish, you know. I don't have there's very few offenses happen in real life. So something about Orthodox, you know, the internet, something about the algorithm and the platforms that we use themselves, like I almost wonder if they're irredeemable, you know.
Hmm.
Maybe we should all just log off, honestly. But I'm still here. I'm still here.
Hmm. Um, why do you think orthodoxy, especially in the West, and you can speak on this, being Orthodox for almost 20 years now, why do you think orthodoxy attracts so many young men?
I mean, we want something to believe in, you know? And you something solid, something that you can grasp with your hand, you know? I think everybody has something. There's something different about it. You know, like I actually like when I first was coming to church, I was very interested in the fasting practices because I was reading about different diets and oh, you do this vegan diet for times, and so I think it's different for everybody. You know, some people like the theology, some people like the singing, some people like the aesthetics. So whatever attracts you, whatever gets you in the door, I think is a good thing. In the end, it doesn't really matter. But what keeps you there is because it's God's will, you know. I mean, God commands us to be baptized. So
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And last time I mentioned about the phenomena of young men coming to the church, I had a number of my female followers get upset saying that, why didn't you talk about the young women coming? There's actually a lot of us coming. Some one sister messaged me saying, I watched your live and you talked about young men, but there's a lot of young women and just women coming in general. She said, I brought my whole family, my husband into the church. So I'll ask you for that perspective, like why do you, and maybe it would be nice to get a sister's perspective on this. Why do you
Mm.
think young women come into the church, and what's the difference between what attracts not just young women, just women in general, just sisters? What attracts men versus women to the church? Is there a difference? Are a lot of the things sort of the same thing? Do they overlap, or different aspects get people in the door?
Well, I mean, what I've first before I answer, I mean, I do see that the trend right now seems to be more young men than women at the present time. But I think the women will follow. They want to follow the men, right? Women
Mhm.
follow men. So I think the women will come eventually. Um, I I guess I can't say. I mean, I could reference maybe what Abbott Trefon says about this. Who says that the women like the intuitive nature of orthodoxy. I guess I don't really have insight into the women's psychology so much, so I'm not sure if I have the answer for
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, and I planned on, apologies, I did plan on having some women on, but we just sort of haven't haven't sort of aligned with that. And actually, there was a sister I wanted to have on who has a channel, but she came through her Belarusian husband. So I'm curious if she would have that same, just sort of following the men. Actually, speaking of this, I want to ask you another question because there's sort of this grievance that was brought to me a few months ago by women in some of the, like, the chats. I have my own like apologia chat where we talk about apology with people. We have these groups, and I have actually a significant amount of women in there, surprisingly. Converts also come to the young women, and they brought this grievance to me, and I sort of told the guys, like, like, don't be weird. So the conversation was essentially, the women come in, they want to find an Orthodox husband, and a lot of the Orthodox men they're interacting with, and this is from multiple women, so this is not just like from one sister, is like they're just like concerned about Orthodox aesthetics. They're like daydreaming about the Byzantine Empire instead of like just being a man, like getting, living like a young man, just having a job, providing, like looking to start a family. And a lot of these sort of young men come in and they have this like, sadly, and this is another comment, they come with like these sort of like red pill ideology of like, women this and that. I just want to be I just want to be a monk. I want to be an aesthetic, which is good. I think you should explore that path, but it sort of puts the woman in this like these guys are kind of weird. Like, I'm not like, women aren't like dreaming about the Byzantine Empire. They come in, they love the churches, they think it's the truth, they love
Mm.
the liturgy and everything. But like, they're like, the men are just, they're weird. Like, especially
Right.
young, I think a lot of like immature young men. So what's your correction, or like what's your word to these young men coming in and they're just like, kind of like abs- absorbed into this online culture, like even their aesthetics online is like Byzantine Empire. They just want to talk about, uh,
Retaking constant.
monarchy and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it's great that they're into the Byzantine Empire, but yeah, I have heard the criticism that the young men are weird, and I think for a woman, calling someone weird is probably the worst. It's probably like the worst word you could call a man is weird, probably.
Mm,
Um, I wanted to be a monk. That was my approach. So I mean, I think that, and I actually chose. I didn't. because I thought I was going to be a monk, I did not choose to go out and find a career where I could make a good living. Uh, so, but if you're, if you're still a young man, you haven't chosen a career yet, or, and you think you're going to get married instead, yeah, go become an engineer, like go to school, become an engineer or an electrician or something, you know, um, get your house in order, also get your faith, practice the faith. And a woman will want to submit to a good man, who knows the faith, who's patient, loving, kind, has their priorities straight, God
Mhm.
first, Um, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for young men. Um, yeah, and maybe this, I don't know if you're familiar with maybe the red pill culture sort of has it. And I think to be honest, like I think there's some good things about the red pill culture, especially right, their tackling of feminism, and a lot of women come with these like feminist ideals, and they're subconscious even, right? They don't even realize
Mm.
they have these things because they've gone through the educational system. So there's a lot of excuse me, I'm coughing a lot. There's a lot of good things about it, but sort of been, being absorbed to a sense where you're like anti, excuse me, anti woman, and it could be problematic.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes there is sort of like, I guess maybe, people like a man saying, "Oh, why don't you just be, submit to me or whatever." That's not necessarily the way of leadership, like you got to, anyhow. Yeah.
um, and we touched a little bit about this, but do you think online orthodoxy has sort of become, and maybe I'm coming from an apologetics perspective, but this is very common on X, by the way, in my personal opinion, and you can speak on this, is more about sort of like owning heretics than leading people to Christ and his church? Has it just become about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just personally don't have interest in that, calling someone a heretic, even if they really are, it's just, that doesn't appeal to me. I don't really necessarily see the value in it, except that it does get attention, clicks, views. And if you're doing this professionally, I guess I could see why, if you would want to take that approach, because then you get more exposure and you can make money. If you make a living, if you're doing it for a living, I can see why that's the approach you would want to take.
Yeah. Yeah, and you sort of have to be smart in that aspect too. If it's something that like you want to do full time or something, you have to lean into some of the culture, right? The internet culture, what gets views. You got to be smart in that too. You can't just be, I'm always just gonna stick to my guns, and that's it. You got to engage in some of the clickbait and clipping you owning heretics or whatever. um, do you think should Orthodox clergy and theologians, right, people that attend seminaries but don't necessarily become priests, uh, be more active online? Do you encourage them to be more active online to
Yeah.
balance out sort of the loud lay voices
I
that
think,
we
yeah,
tend to have?
I think it's good to have that presence on X. We have good priests there, like I like Father Michael Lilly. He's on X. He's like this calm presence. And the thing is, the priest has to have peace to be able to serve the liturgy. And there are going to be temptations, for a priest, if they're on X doing this. People will attack you in the replies. Okay. So it's sort of like they're doing it for our benefit. They don't need to be there But please, please, please be respectful to clergy who are online. Okay, you don't try, if you're a layman, don't try to correct a clergyman, and don't try to embarrass a clergyman. This is I mean, there's a canonical basis for what I'm saying, but try your best not to speak against the clergy, because they represent the church. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've had a few priests respond to some things that I've said. And yeah, I've always tried to be respectful. Like when it comes to having a conversation with clergy, I mean, clergy always, refer to them as a father, or if they're a deacon, deacon, subdeacon, whatever. And yeah, it's just not a good look. Don't try to disrespect clergy online. We have Orthodox perspective. Agreed. I thought there was a young Orthodox. I don't know if this is the same channel that went viral recently of him having an interaction with Cliff Ketchel. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is this morning one, or wait,
This was like
who?
a
Who?
day ago or something. Cliff and his son. There's these two evangelicals. They like preach online.
Oh no, I'm not aware of this
I
one.
don't know if this is the same person, but I thought maybe it
Oh,
was.
okay.
But anyways, it's these two Orthodox Christians, and he sort of confronted this evangelical.
Oh, I saw that this morning. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It was at like MIT or something like that, or Harvard. It was like
yeah, like Harvard, Oxford, or something.
something like that.
I don't know it. But I know those guys. They're good
Oh, you
guys.
you know that guy who was
Yeah,
debating.
it's two guys. They have a channel. Um,
Interesting.
I don't know if it's called Orthodox, but I don't even remember their channel name. But they're constantly having conversations on there. So I appreciate those guys. Um, do you think converts that are coming into the church are more influenced by online orthodoxy than by the lived tradition of the church?
It's the sad truth. It's like
Yeah.
you spend if you spend an hour a day all week long listening to another YouTuber, someone on YouTube, or a priest, let's say, you're unfortunately, that's the truth. It's better to learn from a person, because that person gets to know you, and can uh, you and can give you uh, individualized, sort of like a few, you're working with a priest. He gives you an individualized treatment plan. If you're
Mhm.
watching someone on a screen, there's no way, they don't know who you are. They don't know anything about you. They can't respond to you personally, directly. So
Mhm.
it's not necessarily ideal, but that's how it is.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, he's sort of like, the priest is like a profession in the sense of like he is, your therapist in a sense. He prescribes things to you specifically. He knows you personally. You go and do confessions to him. So that should be where your allegiance lies in, as
absolutely.
opposed to, people will be like, well, I heard this and so online talk about this, and they'll like challenge their priest about it. And yeah, not a good idea. um how do we keep the online orthodoxy experience from replacing like actual parish life and community for converts? Because people, especially
Yeah,
young people, they're like so chronically online, and like that's what they're mostly consuming, and then they're in church once on a Sunday,
right, right.
right?
If that, I know you probably, it's the same with your channel. A lot of people who watch my channel, they are not Orthodox, or might not even be Christian. I don't know why, but they just like to watch it. A lot of people will start to believe, and they feel an affinity to what they're hearing. They like it, but they just can't get themselves to go outside the door and take that step. So we need to be. I think we should encourage people who, like you and I, who are making content, to go to a church. always be encouraging people to take that step, attend church. That's where you're, that's where the internet is a stepping stone to that. That's where your goal is, to be living a parish life. I mean, there's a lot of people who never will. They'll just, for whatever reason, and even Orthodox people, like you go to like a Orthodox country, the amount of people that attend church regularly in Russia, where most people are baptized, is like less than 5%. Like it's always going to be a small, God's flock, the faithful, the pious, is always going to be small, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, I was having a conversation with Understanding Russian Orthodoxy. Great channel. He mostly dives into just Russian Christianity in general. I think it's called Understanding Russian. And he mentioned that I asked him, how many people you think in Russia are actually devout? And he said, based on the statistics that we have, about 5% are actually devout Orthodox Christians. So
Same in Greece. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is sort of a tongue in cheek question here, but because this tends to get brought up from the Protestant apologetics, from their apologists, their pastors, their theologians in the West, here in America especially. And I've interacted with these guys and I have clashes with them. Is it possible to be fully American and fully Orthodox? Or do these two identities clash? Because that's sort of the critique, is like, I can't be
Absolutely.
Orthodox. Yeah.
Absolutely. Why not? What is his argument exactly?
Yeah, I mean,
I-
essentially, the argument is uh, that the American identity is Protestant. Like America was built on the what are the people group that came here? The Puritans, right? The Puritans came here.
okay.
The Puritans are essentially Protestant that came here to escape persecution, and the American identity is Protestant. It's Western. Orthodoxy is ethnic. It's Eastern. It's not American.
Okay.
I can't
Yeah,
be Orthodox.
it is. I mean, yeah, I mean, we are Westerners. A lot of us are kind of stuck in which is sort of like the faith of the Protestants and Westerners is more intellectual, more in the head, whereas Eastern people are in the heart more. But we can baptize our American identity. We can every country has their every people, every ethnos has their particular characteristics that are unique to them. Americans, for example, we're hard workers. We can roll up our sleeves and get the work done. So, for example, right now we have a lot of churches that are bursting at the seams. We got these, young men converts filling up the church. We don't have enough space. My own, for all of them. So let's roll up our sleeves and let's build bigger churches. Let's build more churches. Let's send some of the people who have a little more experience off to seminary to become priests. We need priests. We need good pastors to teach.
Mm.
So there's a lot of work to be done, and Americans love that, So go out there and do it, guys.
Yeah. And speaking of that, of identity, do you think American Orthodoxy has sort of developed its own identity, or are we still sort of borrowing from the old countries?
Yeah, well, we're sort of in the stage of borrowing, I think. I would say,
Okay. Okay. And speaking of Orthodox churches thriving in America, um, yeah, I mean, I've noticed the same thing. We're already expanding our parish here because I mean, it's just so many people. I think we have like 50 catechumens or something. I came into the catechesis class 2 weeks ago or so, and I had to go grab a chair somewhere in the back. Like I couldn't even find a seat there. So it's beautiful. So what does a thriving Orthodox church, speaking of the future, what does a thriving Orthodox church in America look like 50 years from now?
Mm.
And what would it take to get there?
Oh boy, thriving. What is a thriving? I mean, let's. I think there's we want to people people who have been attending church faithfully, regularly, having children, bringing children up in the faith. So, the people who are coming now, we want them to be having children, bringing them up in the faith so that they know the faith well. So I think it will take us, the generation now, we want to be raising children. We want to be creating families and raising children in the faith, so those children can be, the ones to carry it on. That's probably a good goal. Also, I think that we will have to, there's nothing free given in this world, and we are having this, it's almost like a triumphant moment where Orthodoxy is thriving. But I think that there will probably we will need to have people who suffer for the faith to make it real, to make, we need some martyrs. We need some, and if not martyrdom by blood, we need the martyrdom of people going to monasteries, creating monasteries, or filling up current monasteries. There's empty monasteries. There's monasteries that need novices, and genuine spiritual life, healthy spiritual life flows out of those monasteries. The monks, the monastic order is the heartbeat of the church. And this is why our bishops are all monastics. You can't deny this. The bishops hold the keys, right? They give the keys to the priests. So I think if we have so many young men and there's no women, why don't some of those men go to monasteries and become monks and become holy? Holiness is what we need to find, So in both instances, we need holiness, whether you're a family, raising up children, or a monk. But I do think we need some of these young men to basically crucify yourself, which is what Christ calls us to do anyways. So basically crucify yourself and go become obedient, find a spiritual father, and become holy. Yeah. That's probably what it takes.
Yeah. And there was an interesting quote by
great.
Gordon.
Now you're I can't hear you again.
Oh, you can't hear me? You might have to reconnect again.
Okay, maybe you can address some comments or something. I'm gonna leave and come back in.
Okay, again. Well, I'll wait for IP to reconnect here. I'll address some comments here. Felix Rudovsky, приветствую тебя, братан. I don't know if you speak Russian. Felix. Это даже не русское имя, Феликс. Это какое-то испанское. Felix Rudovsky. Rudovsky is like Russian, I think. Приветствую тебя. The root of American identity is rejecting both church authority and state. Going to be difficult to reconcile with the Orthodox phenomenon. I've been pondering over this a lot. Yeah, this is an interesting. This is an interesting comment. Can you hear me, White Bee?
Yep. Yeah, that's a good comment, by the way. I like that.
Yeah, what do you have to say about this? What are your comments on this comment?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We're based on, overthrowing the king and being revolutionaries, but Orthodox are not revolutionaries. And I do think that if this is here we go making kind of, I don't want to be controversial necessarily, but this brings us back to the topic. I do think that some of the young men who are coming into Orthodoxy, they want to overthrow the current leadership. They want to come in and be like, we know what's going on. We know the faith better than you. We can explain our theology to Protestants. We deserve to be in positions of leadership. And so I'm coming back again. This is being controversial. Young P is being controversial here. But, again, we should be looking to the older generation and learning the faith from them and having respect to those who came before us. And by the way, you're kind of interviewing me like I've been around, but 20 years isn't even that long for Orthodox. The people who have been around for 57 years, Abbot Trifon's been a monk for 40, 50 years, something like that. that's who I look to. I look to Abbot Trifon for guidance.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would love, I would love to get Abba Trifon on. Hopefully next time we're at the monastery, I'll get him to say a word. And yeah, and like my priest too, who converted from Protestantism, has been in the faith, for 30 plus years. So yeah, those are the people we should be looking up to, definitely. Um, uh, should be fully transitioned to English in the liturgy in American parishes, or is there value in keeping the original languages?
I think there's value, but so it kind of makes, I mean, at our parish we still have Russian people coming who speak Russian, right? And it makes them they appreciate it, right? It makes them feel at home, even if they don't understand. Someone who speaks Russian doesn't necessarily understand Slavonic very well. It takes, from what I understand, it takes a little time getting used to before they can understand what's being said. But like we sing the antiphons in Slavonic, and we don't even understand the words that we're saying, except that we already know what the words mean. But yeah, I mean, sure, we could keep it, but I think the primary language should be English in parishes.
Mhm. Yeah. I can understand Slavonic quite easily. Reading it, some of the letters are a little different, but that is because I speak both Russian and Ukrainian, and Slavonic is sort of a mixture of those two, right? Because those dialects at
Mm.
one point separated, and the Russian language actually became a little more Latinized, right? Because of the Byzantines, they added like certain Latin words that we still have in Ukrainian in the old Slavonic. They might not have them in Russian. So speaking both, it makes it extremely easy to understand Old Church Slavonic, and I do love Old Church Slavonic. It's beautiful. All right, we've been live for about an hour, almost an hour and a half. So we're gonna close out here soon. But you touched on this, that we need martyrs in American Orthodoxy. So I guess let's end on this question, this note. It's a serious note. Do you think American Orthodoxy is prepared to suffer, like really suffer if persecution ramps up and comes here in America? Like, do you think that we're ready to suffer as Orthodox Christians in America?
We better be. We're gonna find out, right? We have people who are very zealous. Keeping on topic, we have people who are very zealous online. They can,
Mm,
you can attack a Catholic, but what happens when it comes to you and it's time to suffer for the faith, right?
mm,
So be prepared. That is a part of Orthodoxy and always has been from the beginning. The first century Christians, you know, they knew that becoming Christian, this was just known. To become a Christian meant you are risking your very life. You may die
mm,
because for confessing Christ. So be very careful not to deny Christ. That is a very serious fall.
mm.
So we just need to prepare ourselves, and we'll find out. We'll find out after who are the ones that are approved. After that comes.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons also why I don't even criticize some of the people that sort of I guess compromise when I read some of the history during during the communist era. Some people sort of compromise to stay alive or maybe save their parishes. I don't ever criticize these people because like that's the question, like am I ready to suffer if everything was to come? And my ancestors suffered right during the communist. I mean, my grandfather spent 5 years in a Kazakhstan camp. Sadly, he was a Protestant because his parents would be my great grandparents, apostatized from the faith. But they also suffered, right? They also suffered. Sadly, they ended up apostatizing and coming to Protestantism. But I mean, he suffered as a Protestant in a camp, and a lot of these people, and just even like when my grandfather was still alive, right, speaking to him about it, he was a very zealous Protestant. But speaking to him about it, it was like he was ready to die for it. He was ready to die for it, and I mean, yeah, people suffered great. I mean, they suffered great. Like some of the stories, I mean, my grandfather wrote a whole book about it. It's in Russian, but the stories are wild. I mean, he was a pretty tall guy. He's like 6'1". When he came home after the camp, like he was like 100 pounds. That's insane for me to think. He came home like skin and bone from these camps, and just the things they did to them in these camps. I mean, there were Catholic bishops there, right? Orthodox bishops there that were serving, that were suffering with the communists. They didn't discriminate what they did, right? They would throw people out. People would get sick, start dying. They would throw them out near the forest. The wolves would devour them, like literally devour them. They would go back out, and it would just be their clothing left. So, and people love. There's like some beautiful stories. People love these bishops. I mean, they were just such beautiful representations to the other people at those camps. So I think it's a good note, to end on. Like, are we ready to suffer as Orthodox Christians in America if it comes, and it might come? Do you have any sort of final comments on that, YP?
I mean, that's real. That, suffering, like that's the realest thing there is. So,
Yeah. And before your mic gave out last time, or your sound, there was I was gonna say there's a comment by Jordan Peterson, actually, who's, as we know, is good friends with Jonathan Peugeot. But he says that, I think, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but he says something along the lines of like, Western Christianity is all about like accepting the cross. He's like, in Orthodoxy, it's pick up your damn cross. Like, you pick up your damn cross and you walk with it. And yeah, Orthodoxy is suffering. And one of the things, there's a young man who's getting baptized soon, and he asked me to become his sponsor. But this young man came to the church sort of through the aesthetic aspects of it. And I remember when he came to the church, and we're just having conversations about Orthodox, and he's like learning. And I sent him a fasting schedule, and he's like, "Whoa, like what is this?" And I was like, "Welcome to Orthodoxy." Like, and I'm like, "You should have," I kind of like, I brought things on him slowly. I'm like, "What about your prayer rule? Like, you have a prayer rule?" And he's like, "Dude, I gotta do all this stuff." And I'm like, "That's Orthodox. This is what living out. This is an online Orthodoxy. You have to live out your faith."
yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly, a lot of people let that be a reason not to become orthodoxy because they don't want the prayer rule and they don't want the fasting.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good reason to stay away from church. Come anyways, I say. You know,
Mhm.
just come to church anyways. You don't have to. We're not going to force you to do the other things. It would be good if you did, but just come to church.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess I'll address this last comment. Americans are incapable of dealing with suffering. COVID showed that the prosperity gospel infects this place like miasma. What do you think about that, YP?
Well, there were most people caved during COVID, but there were some
Mhm.
people who didn't, and they refused the shot. So maybe it's a small percentage, but some people came through that for better for it,
Mm.
I suppose.
Yeah, I would actually say I would actually disagree with you. I think Americans are more than, I'm talking about naval orange gazer there. I think Americans are more than ready to suffer, even more so. I think a lot of people in the old country, because being from Eastern Europe, the sort of the vibe there is very melancholy. like because a lot of like because we had the serfdom, right, and under uh, the tsardom, we had serfdom. People were just kind of used to suffering, and so people just kind of accept authority and whatever's happening in those particular
Mm,
countries. And when rebellion does happen, like for example, when we had Maidan, when they were rebelling against the government in Ukraine, it was like, what? Like people are actually doing stuff. Or in Georgia right now, like
mm,
people are fighting against the government, and you're like, what people are doing. So I think Americans are more, if really being Americans are more willing to, I think maybe suffer than even people from the old country. That's just my opinion. So, but anyways, thank you for all the people joining us. Thank you, YP. I thought it was a wonderful conversation. YP, what are some closing words you have, and then maybe tell people where they can find you and stuff like that.
Well, thank you for having me on. This has been great. I've been kind of thinking about this topic anyways, so I'm glad I had a chance to flesh it out in conversation. Come to church. That's
Mhm.
all I really want to say. Don't just stay in the watching the YouTube and making comments. Come to church. And if you want to follow me, I think there's links below, but my YouTube channel is Young Penitent, and I'm at Young Penitent on X, so you can find me there.
Awesome. Thanks, YP. Thank you for everyone else, and blessed Lent to you all. We're almost there. The journey's almost over. I hope everybody is having a great Lent. В ім'я Отця і Сина і Святого Духа. Thank you guys. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, comment, and subscribe for more, and follow my social medias in the description below. I'll see you next time. God bless.